This video is going to walk you through how to make histograms. The first thing you might be wondering about histograms is what do they look like? They look like bar charts, but they're actually graphs that show the distribution of quantitative data across these intervals. Each of these intervals are called classes. In this example here, there are 5 classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when we try to figure out these graphs, we want to first of all figure out how big should our intervals be, or these classes be. The next thing after we figure out how big the classes should be, we want to figure out how many of each data point fall under each of these intervals. That's called a frequency table. And after you figure out the frequency table, we just transfer the information over to the histogram. So let's look at an example here. Here I've got a lemonade stand that had some customers each day. They're in no particular order, but in this case I rearranged them to be in numerical order. But you may have had 13 customers on one day, 23 on another, 21, but then taking all your data points of the values you had on your lemonade stand, I now have them arranged in numerical order. When you're trying to calculate the classes or how big your intervals should be, you want to look at the kind of numbers that you're working with. In this case, I'm working with numbers that are mostly in the tens. Now, in the tens, I want to round to the nearest 10 value. So when you're trying to figure out your classes, you want to round the minimum value down, so that would round this down to 0, and round your upper value, your highest value, then up to the nearest 10, which would make it 50. So if I took these values from 0 to 50, and then I wanted to make classes, let's say I want to make 5 classes, I would then take my maximum minus minimum, which is 50, and divide by 5, and I would get 10, which means my intervals should count by tens across the x-axis. But let's say you wanted to have 6 classes. And if I had 6 classes, let's say I put 50 divided by 6, and I get 8.3. Well, you don't want to round that down, because if you round it down, this 45 sometimes might get chopped off on your classes, and it won't fit in your 6 classes. So always round up. So in this case right here, I would round that up to 8.5. So if I count by 8.5s, I would have 6 classes, and all the data would fit in those 6 classes. But we're going to stick with 5 classes where I'm going to count by tens. So if I wanted to go into the next step, which is making the actual frequency table for this information, I would then look at my data and go, well, each class was supposed to count by tens, so I rounded this down to 0, so I'll start there first. So I have 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, and it's tempting to say 50, but I've already got my 5 classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of these intervals has to go up to a highest value. In this case, you don't want to go 0 to 10 because 10's already covered here. So I'm only going to go to 0 to 9. That means 10 goes to 19, 20 goes to 29, 30 goes to 39, and 40 goes to 49. There are my 5 classes. All this data will fit in those 5 classes. Then I want to try to find out how often these data values fall in each of these intervals. There's one single value at 0 to 9, so I got a 4 here, which falls under this one. 11 and 13 and 18 all fall under the teens from 10 to 19. 21 through 25, that's 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, that fall in the 20s. And then I got 130 and I've got 145. Then I take my frequency table and I transfer it over to my histogram. Since I'm counting by tens down the left-hand side here, I'm going to count those out here as well. So 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Then I got to figure out my y-axis. My y-axis is the highest number of times that each of these, or one of these classes goes. In this case, it's 4. So I'll make 4 be the top of my y-axis, and then I'll scale it accordingly, and then have each of these then count evenly up to 4. Next, then I'd make bar graphs out of each one of these intervals. So the first interval goes up only 1 unit. So there's my first interval from 0 to 9, and I have one data value that does that. I've got data values from 10 to 19, and then it happens 3 times. So that goes like this, and I've got 3 times that happens. I'll color that in nicely. And then I've got 4 values in the 20s, so I go up to 4 from the 20s, and then I would label that happening 4 times. And then I would simply go to the last 2 that each happen once, so I'd have 1 here at 1 and 1 here at 1, and there's my histogram. Now to get full credit for a histogram, you'd hopefully label your x-axis, that's your customers, and the other one is the frequency, which is the number of times that these customers had purchased lemonade. That's a perfect histogram. Good luck making them in your homework as well.